Today we are joined by Hmingthanzuali and Mary Vanlalthanpuii. Hmingthanzuali is an assistant professor in the Department of History and Ethnography at Mizoram University, and she is one of the editorial board members of the MJU Humanities and Social Sciences Journal. Juali works in the interdisciplinary area of history and gender studies. Her area of interest are gender and armed conflict, oral history, and post-colonial literature, among others. Mary is a research fellow at Northeast India Studies at the Asiatic Society, Kolkata. She has recently given her viva for the PhD research on the Mizoram Accord, June 30th, 1996, and the changing roles of Mizo women in formal and informal politics, a critical evaluation. Thank you for joining us today, Mary and Juali. First of all, Mary, both of you, Mary and Juali, you work in areas of armed conflict and gender issues in Mizoram. Can you tell us a bit about the Mizo Accord and its significance in today's society?
Regarding the Mizoram Accord, yes, first let me express take this opportunity to express my gratitude to the Zubaan team, the Culture of Peace, for having us the opportunity to explore the Mizo society, the Mizo women, which have been uncovered in this academic discourse. We really valued and appreciate your initiative. Yes, let me point out the Mizoram Accord, the formations of the Mizoram Accord. Prior to the colonial period, Mizo experienced numbers of periodic famine that often caused starvations, hardships, and fatality. Bamboo famine can be explained as a massive increase in numbers of rats populations due to the flowering of the bamboos. In the year 1958, on the event of potential famine threat, the Mizo District Council seek financial assistance for the relief measure, but the Assam government rejected on the ground of the unscientific reasons and tribal superstitious belief. So when the bamboo famine hit the district in 1958, to take up a relief measures, the Mizo Society, formed by the educated middle-class families in 1950 to safeguard the ethnic identity of the Mizo, formed a new organization called Mizo National Famine Front. Under the chairmanship of Mr. Laldeng in 1958, the main objective of this organization was helping the famine victims and convince them to protest the Assam government that brought misery to the populations. The feeling of anger over the Assam government led to the establishment of the underground movement in 1961 with a modified name as Mizo National Front. The movement demanded an independent sovereign state of the Greater Mizoram. This is how our insurgency emerged in the Mizo. I think that fits the patients.
Juali, you have been working extensively on the changing roles of Mizo women through the last few decades. Can you please tell us a bit about the position and status of Mizo women at present?
Yeah, thank you. Mizo society at present is a patriarchal society in nature where male dominance is prevalent. Okay, so if you look at the education and female literacy percentage as indices of women's status. Okay, Mizo women seem to enjoy satisfactory position in the society. So as a result of education and workforce, many women entered what we regarded as a public space, as government employees and in business and commercial centers. Okay, so if you visit the main market in Aizawl and other markets in different towns and villages, you will notice that unlike many other countries, most vegetable vendors and meat sellers are women, and many shops are owned and manned by women. Okay, so and then in various roadside stone quarries, women often outnumbered men. However, the entry of women into public space doesn't mean that the status of all Mizo women is satisfactory. So when we talk in terms of labor force, we also need to consider the position of grassroots women who are struggling to earn for their family. because while entering the public space, women, particularly those who are from grassroots level, cannot simply leave their domestic chores. For example, female vegetable vendors and women working in stone quarries usually bring their babies and young children at their workplace. Moreover, despite their hard labor, women have no rights of inheritance or ownership in their parents uh, or in their or after their marriage. Okay, so and another point is that the society still has the a traditional patriarchal mindset. Whether she is highly educated or holding high position in government offices, a woman is always expected to accomplish some social expectations attributed to her. Okay, so nowadays this patriarchal attitude has been reinforced through social media. Like for instance, it is very common to make a list of do's and don'ts for women, particularly married women, that are circulated again and discussed in different groups of WhatsApp and Facebook. Okay, so in this way, so one may say that women's position in the present society is not very satisfactory.
Thank you for telling us about the Mizo status of Mizo women at present. I think it holds true for most of the Northeast. Like even though at one point on one aspect, women might seem to be more visible or be more equal than others. But if you really go to the roots of what's going on, then we find that women are not equal. Women are still facing a lot of problems, which are often overlooked by the whole exoticization of Northeast women being more equal. Thank you so much, Charlie. Mary, you have written a lot of research and written a lot about the roles of church women, which is very interesting because not many people talk about the contribution of women in the church. So, can you tell us a bit about how they are, the hierarchy that's happening within the church women, the changing roles that they have, and at their position vis-a-vis the general population?
Thank you for asking. First, let me explain about your previous questions about the changing roles of women from the last few decades. I think it's very difficult to say this present status of the Mizo women. Well, there has been some changes of improvement comparing to the past. There has been no much changes in some areas, whether in the field of economic, social, and politics. I would say the changes women's experience are imbalanced. Okay, while women have made considerable gains in literacy, work participation, but they remain underrepresented in the state politics. Because women have the second highest literacy rate in India and highest work participation rate, we may assume that women play a major role in politics as well. In terms of economic, in 2001, Mizoram had the highest female work participation rate of the country at 47.5% compared to the male at 57%. However, the female work participation rate declined and it was dropped to 6 positions in 2011 census at 36% against the male at 52%. But in case of Mizoram, it is very clear that the economic participation does not necessarily enhance their status in politics. It is always necessary to understand the natures of women's work participations. Yes, women improvement in literacy rate brought about significant changes in the growth of the female work participations. But women's economic participation remain largely concentrated in the informal sector of economy, where they lack bargaining power to use economic power to gain political rights. In case of politics, since 2003, the number of registered voters has outnumbered the numbers of male voters in the Mizoram Legislative Assembly elections, but this has not been resulted in more women being elected to the Legislative Assembly. 4 women have been elected and nominated during the pre-statehood, and the post-statehood has only 2 female legislators. So in terms of church, women have played a key role in supporting the Presbyterian Church since the establishment of the Presbyterian Church in 1897. even though they continue to be denied access to the most influential position as pastor and elder. Instead of fighting, what is very surprising is that instead of fighting for access to these positions, women have channeled their energies into activities that allows them to exert their influence without holding the formal power. They became Bible women in the early period, and they they raised funds through the promotions of the Handful of Rice project, and they became hundreds of female theologians and as well as female missionaries. So my general observations regarding the changing roles of Mizo women is that women lag behind men in access to resource and power. They have benefited less from the Mizoram Accord as well. So the reason usually advanced for this is that traditions, colonialism, Christian church, and the extent to which women have been socialized to accept our positions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for explaining this so well, Mary and Juali again. Mary, you work with the Asiatic Society.
Yep.
Can you tell us a bit about your work with the Asiatic Society and what the Asiatic Society is about?
Yeah, I'm working on church politics in the Asiatic Society. So my focus in this project is that the problem with the lack of written records or lack of the representations of women in the history. What I'm saying is that church history omits women and pays very little attention to the role played by women in their own conversions. When natives are mentioned, it is usually men leaving out the important roles of women as a Bible women, or women's fellowship emerged as a big financial supporter of the church. I'm trying to restore the role of women in the church while focusing on their financial contributions to building the early Presbyterian church and how it developed over the years to play an important role in financing the church and how they generate hundreds of female theologians and female missionaries. However, despite their contribution, as I mentioned earlier, women are still denied as a pastor and elder. The church's definitions of gender roles prevents them from accepting women's as equal within the church. Let me point out just one of the project of the Handful of Rice. This is a humble activity united in offering, represented by every family. Every Presbyterian church was asked to put aside a handful of rice each time they cooked the meal. This was done by keeping aside a handful of rice in a small container every time they cooked the meal. This was a way of thanking to the Lord that everyone, the rich, the poor, and the young and the old could participate. The rice would then offer it to the church, which would sell it to generate income. The Handful of Rice project produced more than the estimated budget every year. Okay, for example, in 2016 to 2017, the estimated budget was 1.3 million, but they produced 1.6 million. Well, the capital income for the project submitted to the headquarters, that is the synod, was utilized to support the church and its worker, missionary field, and different synod department. It also served as important security for the synod, utilized as a contingency fund. The synod has various projects such as while the funding generated for other projects like missionary fund, hospital fund are exclusively serve their own activities, their own purpose. Funds from the Handful of Rice project are freely utilized to cover the shortage of other projects. Therefore, the project of the Handful of Rice constitute the primary resource of the synod. I would say that in spite of this, there has been discriminations against women despite their considerable contributions. One explanation of this would be the agreement between indigenous culture and Christian patriarchy on the women's secondary status, the ban on female ordinations, and the underutilizations of women's theological status, combined with the decision to phase out Bible women, has limited the role women could play in the church. Despite these discriminations, women continue to be steadfast supporters of the church and seldom protest their positions. The split between some wanting ordinations and other opposed further complicated the issues. So the present status in the church is the outcome of a long process of interaction between the traditional cultures and our patriarchal religions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for such interesting insights. Juali, you are working with Mizoram University. At the same time, you are also associated with the Indian Association for Women's Studies. Can you please tell us some of the works that which you have been involved with?
Yeah, I've been working on history of armed conflict in Mizoram since the past 15 years. Because my paper particularly tried to retrieve women's voices by alternating by using alternative sources like oral narratives and women's personal accounts, because over the last 30 years, numerous works focusing on the history of armed conflict or troubled times, which the Mizo called Rambuai, okay, have been produced in the region. However, a considerable number of texts on Rambuai have been dominated by successful stories of men, particularly elite group of men, underplaying the contributions and agency of women. So, and then, but I came to, during my field work, I went through the Mizo National Front registration book. From there, I came to know that more than 70 women registered their names as volunteers to join the underground. From few documents and rumors, I also came to know that numerous women were captured and, they were imprisoned during the times of conflict. But despite this, rarely do we find in official documents and Rambuai literatures the roles women played during these troubled times. So it is only as a sexual victim that women usually are emerged as an important subject in armed conflict discourse. So in this discourse, women are made to remain silent and are devoid of agency. So, to let women speak for themselves, and me and Mary, even Mary is working on the Rambuai, and both of us attempted to retrieve women's voices by using these sources, alternative sources like oral narratives and women's personal accounts. So from my research, I came to learn that many female volunteers were employed for clerical work, while some of them played the role of looking after wounded armies, cooking, washing clothes, and so on. Aside from this, the apparent role and contributions of women can be retrieved from their prison memoirs. Okay, so because a prison is one of the important sites where women entered a battlefield as protectors of their male counterparts and their families. So many of these prisoners were government servants and relatives of MNF leaders and volunteers. So throughout their incarceration, most of these female prisoners were interrogated over and over again to provide information about political plots of MNF and the whereabouts of the MNF wanted volunteers. So that means that most of these female prisoners enter different stages of interrogation. So from my research, I came to learn that female prisoners could exercise their agency in protecting their menfolk by providing negative answers to the interrogators. So in this situation, female prisoners often use obstinate silence. They used to remain silent as a tool of resistance. Obstinate silence. They used to maintain obstinate silence as a tool of resistance. So rather than disclosing about the secrets of their menfolk, female prisoners sometimes chose to tolerate physical assaults. So I was also very amazed to learn that most of these women never merely regard themselves as a victim, rather than a political victim of a state terror. These women present themselves as political activists or actor in jail. So when I read prison writings, I particularly focus on one prison memoirs written by a young lady Zari. Okay, Zari was she was the only female prisoner who was in prison for 5 years, and then so like I came to learn that Zari always identified herself as actor, uh, whom the security officers admired and were even afraid of her in the jails. So, like, if you read her text, Zari also concluded her first notebook by representing herself as a victor. Her notebook, she wrote a notebook, and apart from notebooks, she also maintained diaries throughout her incarceration in jail. So, and then if you read her first notebook, Zari represented herself as a victor who, through the guidance of God, had won the battle which was fought between Mizo and the Indian behind the walls of the jail. So even if you read her text, on the cover of her notebook, Zari wrote, "Victory belongs to God." That's how women represented themselves in their writings and even in their oral narratives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juali. My next question was about to, I was about to ask you to tell us a little bit about Jari, because there's a very interesting, interesting area which I think not many people would have access to. Did you have any problem or did you or Jari have any problem when you were writing about her? Because I think as a former member of those times they used to say underground group. So usually they have problems when they are telling out their story. Did you have any problem, or did Jari have any problem when you were?
No, I have no much problem when I met her. Like, since I've been working on Rambuai history. Okay, I was often asked to meet this lady, because Zari was the only female convicted prisoner who was sentenced to life imprisonment during Rambuai. She was a young lady of 22 when she was arrested. Okay, so, and then she was she was captured because she was captured in the issues related to the assassination of IGP in January 13, 1975. Okay, IGP and 3 other Indian officers were assassinated by MNF volunteers. Okay, so Zari by the time was a clerical staff in that office. So Zari was suspected to be involved in this incident because Zari it is like from the official documents. Okay, I came to extract one official document from ISO DC record in which it is written that Zari used to assist those culprits. Okay, so and then she was therefore captured in connection to this incident. Okay, so she was in prison for 5 years from 1975 to 1982, and she was the only female prisoners who was convicted to life imprisonment along with other male volunteers.
This is really so interesting. I mean, I could go on and on asking you to tell me more and more about Zari and your work. One thing which we have seen is, even though the Dortist communities are highlighted as communities in society where women have greater social participation and are more visible than the rest of India, so in the way our history has been framed, how far do you think that women are visible in history making? Are women's voice there in our histories?
Okay, thank you. I think there are some misunderstanding regarding the place of Northeast women in communities and societies, because many people, particularly from mainland India, fail to notice that Northeast India is inhabited by hundreds of ethnic groups with their own distinctive cultural practices. Like because various forms of social and religious institutions such as Brahmanical, patriarchal, tribal patriarchal, and matriarchal society are found in in this region. So in such societies, historical generalizations on the various experiences of women under one umbrella often end up in miscalculation. So but it is usually under tribal, patriarchal, and matriarchal societies that Northeast women are believed to have a greater social participation than the rest of India. Okay, so while social and religious organizations form an important part in the proper functioning of the tribal communities, it is the activities and contributions of women that make this organization a successful one. But this does not signify that Northeast women have greater contribution and louder voices than their sisters in the rest of India, which is also reflected in history writing, because in all the history of Northeast India, whether it is a political or social, women's contribution and their voices still remain marginal, and all the history writings are dominated by males' perspectives. And regarding the invisibility of women, patriarchal domination, along with the construction of gender roles, which are confirmed by women themselves, is the main reason. From my opinion, because women rarely regarded themselves as knowers or keepers of knowledge of the past, because for this reason, majority of history is written by men. Because during my field work, I came across many women for interview, and then majority of them at first felt that their memories will not make enough contribution in the making of Rambuai history. Okay, thank you.
Mary, do you think the contribution of women in general and of the church women in particular has been reflected in the history that you have known of Mizoram?
Yes, just thank you. Yes, just you have mentioned about the lack of history writings of the Mizo women, especially in particular. Let me speak about the Mizo women in particular. I would start by saying that Mizos are very patriotic about the Mizoram, okay? And there is a discourse here throughout the India that women in the Northeast are more liberated than the mainland women. Being an insider as a woman, there are certain issues that is not comfortable to raise for fear of taken as trying to disrespect our society image. So I always felt during my journey to PhD that raising the feminist issues can be seen as a critic of the Mizo culture in society. But in reality, I strongly believe that our work, like Zuali's work and myself and the other work as well, would offer corrections to along establish myth that Northeast women are free. So seriously, Indian writers often keep talking about women in the Northeast India are liberated, having more rights than other women than the mainland Indian. Writers of the histories of the India have omitted Northeast, even when they wrote about the Northeast, Mizoram is often excluded. Because they did not have study like the way we study to draw attention to it. So I think we really need, in order to make more visible to the history of the women, I think we really need more studies like ours to explore what are the internal and external factors that influence women present positions, and how the cultural and religious belief defines the women's role. They need to pay attention to the external factors such as politics and church institutions, how this institution helped shape our society attitude towards women. Yeah, regarding your questions, you talk about the church women's, but I just want to mention, let me first, I wanted to include the discriminatory natures of the customary law, which always neglected by the mainland Indian writers. Yeah. Secondly, we need to recognize the discriminatory natures of the customary law that governing the social organizations. Okay, the implementations, as we all know, that the implementations of the Lusai Hill District Autonomous District Council in 1952 was based on the sixth schedule to the constitutions of India that provide Mizoram special administrative setup to safeguard our culture and customs. The Mizoram Accord of 1986 preserved these regulations under Article 371G of 1986 Amendment Act of 53rd Amendment Act of 1986. This means that the Mizoram Accord protected the patriarchal constructions of the Mizo customary law that largely degraded women's status, effectively working against the rights of women. For example, the law of inheritance privilege maligned and does not recognize women's inherited property. In case of divorce, women cannot claim any property right except for personal belongings. Although the Mizo Marriage Divorce Ordinance Act of 2014 provide a wide range of opportunity for women to claiming their rights, but it is very, very difficult to say how many women would benefit from this right and agree to proceed to the courts. So I think your questions my answer will not be appropriate enough to meet your questions, but I just want to include the problem of the customary laws because it has been neglected by many discourses in the notice.
Yes, you're right, Mary. Customary law is something which many discourses often overlook. And even sometimes, like, there is always a conflict between the customary law and the legal law. Sometimes in Manipur, like sometimes we have problems like when there is some gender violation going on, and that the NGOs and people, they want to give proper punishment or justice as per the legal, as under the constitution. But sometimes customary laws step in, and the women are not able to get justice. Does something like that happen also in Mizoram?
Yes, as I have mentioned, without the approval of the Mizoram Legislative Assembly, it cannot be modified. Even though the Mizo Women's Organization, since its establishment around in 1972, if I'm not wrong, they tried to modify the customary law by submitting memorandum to the government. But still, it is very, very difficult. But what is very crucial about the role of women political representation is that during 1958 of Mrs. Ming Liani representations in the district council, she helped change the Mizo customary law regarding inheritance rights. Women can inherit property if written in the will, to her efforts, I would say, and the support of the women's organizations of that period. And in 2014 or 2018, I don't remember, 2014, I believe, Mrs. Vanlalthanpuii, she was also a member of the legislature. With her support, the Mizoram Legislative Assembly again passed the Mizo Marriage Divorce Ordinance, the Mizo Marriage, Divorce and Inheritance of Property Act of 1942. I think it is very important to have women in the legislature in order to make women benefit about the status. I think we need to recognize this.
Thank you, Mary. Juali, would you like to add anything regarding gender status and the customary law?
Yeah, regarding women's place in the field of politics, I would like to add a few points. Though like chances have very limited, in political field, but women's place also has been expected to enhance in this field, because as a result of reservation policies, 1/3 of female membership, so 1/3 of the total membership is reserved for women in the present Aizawl Municipal Corporation, local council, and village council as well. So, but as Mary has already mentioned, in the Legislative Assembly, women's representation is still negligible.
It's really interesting how both of you are rereading and rewriting Mizo history as in a sort of feminist recovery project by retrieving silent voices of women. Is Jari's writing the only one of his kind, Juali?
Yeah, actually, she wrote. She only wrote diaries and maintained notebooks throughout her stay in jail, which is not yet properly published. Okay, but in 1986, in 1980s, cyclostyle copy of Zari's prison writing, which is titled Zari's Diary, was appeared and published by Mizo Students Union in Shillong. This is during times of conflict. Okay, so the two volumes, which was published shortly after Zari's release, seem to reflect the politics in Mizoram, wherein violence inflicted by the Indian security forces was stated in the first page of the copy. In this diary, in this psychostyle copy, it is mentioned. This diary reveals the brutal behavior of the Indian armies towards the Mizo people, as they could even torture the Mizo women. Okay, so this is published in the year 1980s. Okay, so there's the copy. There is, I think, the copy. There is no any other copy of this. Psychostyle copy of the Zari's prison writings that has been published by MSU, Middle Union, in the present day. But apart from this, Zari wrote articles. Okay, one articles in one souvenir. Because I forgot the name of the souvenir. Apart from that article, Zari hasn't yet published any writings. Okay, this is her first-hand account. Okay, it is not yet properly published.
Yes, in Jerry's writing, see, I think in one portion when you are writing about Jerry, you mentioned how Jerry was, agonized by the fact that there was a lot of rumors going on about her.
Yes.
Rumors of her being raped by the Indian
Yes.
army, of her mixing with the Indian army,
Yes.
and in that kind of rumor, I see a certain level of the Mizo patriarchy
Yes.
coming in, and how Jerry as a woman, how her gender also helped in this kind of rumor. So can you please explain how this process of patriarchy also affected her, and how this kind of otherization of the other people who are not Mizo mixing with Jerry, and how that kind of was association
Yes.
also affected Jerry.
Yeah, one may say that during her incarceration, Zari was trapped in between two patriarchies. Okay, so like Mizo patriarchy and let's say another mainstream Indian patriarchy. Okay, so as you already mentioned that while she was in jail, like it was believed that like the Mizo communities believed that Zari was raped many times, and she even allowed herself her body. Okay, she even gave her body to the Indian armies. Okay, so she received many letters from her communities blaming her for taking naked pictures with the Indian armies. Okay, so and then aside from that, Zari was Zari of course did not mention about the sexual torturing, but she frequently mentioned how she was physically tortured by the Indian armies. Okay, so actually, like as I already mentioned, she was. Most of these women were interrogated when she was in jail, because Zari was believed to be involved in this assassination. So they really wanted to know the secrets of the Mizo volunteers. And apart from that, they were always asking her the whereabouts of the MLF volunteers. Okay, so she was trapped in between between these two patriarchies. So but in most of the times, as I always said, that Zari never willing to share her knowledge about the movements and then political plots of the MNF. So and this way she was trapped in between these two patriarchies. Like while she was trying to protect her uh, her own man, like she was on the other hand um, uh, physically tortured and mentally and physically tortured by the Indian armies. Yes.
During your research, Mary, did you also come across any kind of writings by the church women which would be of interest to today's generation?
In particular, in Mizo particular, I don't see any kinds of, yeah, of course, there are some history writing, but what's the problem we have is that, as I have mentioned earlier, history omits women, especially the roles of women. So what we have seen about the women's, a little about the women's, is that the colonial writings. See, I just had the questions from one of my friends a scholar from abroad. She keep asking me why you don't have any Mizo history writing. Even Mizo women's, the historians of the present, so the present historian even neglect writing about the Mizo women's history. She was asking me why all your histories are collected from US or UK. So the thing is that we don't have any other indigenous writings other than the colonial writers. So that is still the problem. So most of the documents I have collected, I could collect regarding the women's are just from the colonial writings, unfortunately.
I think this is something which is true for all of us in the Northeast. What is regarded as the reference point is often the colonial writing. Even like for the Métis also is T.C. Hudson's The Métis, which everyone refer to when they want to talk about the Métis. Mary and Jolly, both of you together are putting, are working on a book of Mizo women's writing for Zubaan. Can you tell us a bit about Mizo literature and the kind of writings that women do? Yes, Jolly.
Yeah, regarding literature, okay, like since I've been working on Rampoy literature, okay, I think studies on troubled times or like Rampoy is the literature produced in the region, the richest literature produced in the region, because over the last 30 years, different genres of writings are produced by Mizo writers as well as non-Mizo writers, such as MNF narratives, songs, poetry, stories, fiction, and non-fiction. Okay, so for many years, Mizo, if you look at narratives, these narratives mainly they deal with the stories of MNF leaders and other leading volunteers, but casting aside what other groups of people did in times of conflict. And then other genres of writings also emerge during this period, including songs, poetry, and stories, and stories, non-fiction and fiction. So, but these writings are more inclusive than the MNF narratives by highlighting the social realities of those times. And then, while numerous songs are related to village groupings during Ramwai, highlighting Mizo people's sense of belongings to their village. The songs also reflected the sufferings of women and other groups of civilian. And it is also worth mentioning here that a non-Mizo IPS officer from Assam composed a song to show his respect for Zari, okay, a female prisoner, Zari. And then, moreover, many other songs were composed by women. These songs mainly are love songs and then songs that depicted women's sufferings. Okay, so, and then in recent times, there's a growing interest in academic writings from different perspectives. Okay, so most of these academicians are engaged in the effort towards rescuing the hidden people from their invisibility in literatures. So as a result of this, women and their contribution also began to be included in the existing literatures. Thank you.
Mary, when you're working, the work that you are doing for Zubaan at present, the collection of women's writing that you're working on, what sort of writings are you looking at?
We are just started to work now. We have not decided yet. Anyway, I think I should look at regarding the church women's. Regarding the church women's attitude towards women's legitimate participations in the church. So let me just point out this history of the Mizo in the church. Okay, in 1978, Mrs. Saptoni was elected as a church elder, but the church assembly rejected her ordinations. The church objection to Mrs. Saptoni ordination stand on the fact that there has been no elder in the history of in the past. So the Aizol, and not only that, the Aizol Theological College, established in 1903, opened admissions to women only in 1968. The first female theologians who obtained a Bachelor of Divinity was in 1977. Now we have almost around 120 female theological graduates, and there are around 8 female who obtained a doctoral degree. So a proposal to female ordinations have been discussed in the Synod Assembly twice in 2011 and 2001, but both rejected. Both the Assembly rejected. There was a strong opinion among the majority of the delegates in both the assemblies that even if female pastoral ordinations are approved in the Assembly, the society was not ready to accept female pastor. So regarding my survey, majority felt that they are not ready to have a female pastor. They didn't want women to administer sacrificial rituals in the church like sacrament and baptism. Others who supported female ordinations are still very critical on female theologians, arguing that all the female theologians are not qualified to become a pastor. So they demand a qualified female pastor must have a capability to manage the church communities, which they think a very difficult task for a mother and a wife. So they wanted female theologian to obtain all the privilege male could have, but not to work like a pastor who are assigned to administer churches. So that's what I'm still working. I will work on.
So you're looking at a collection of Ramboy literature and maybe some work from the church women angle.
Only the church.
Yeah, Mary.
Yeah, I think I will look on the church itself for this time. My previous work was concerned with the insurgent politics. Now I decided to work on the church politics.
So for this collection of women writing for which you are working on, you will be working on for Zubaan, what languages would the women be writing it? Would it be primarily in English, or would it be in one of the language indigenous language, then translated to English?
Yes, I will translate it to English. Some language will be translated into English, but the writing should be in English only.
So I'm aware of only a few writers from Mizoram. I mean, and that was a long time back. So can you tell me a bit about the women who are presently writing in Mizoram? I mean, contributing to Mizo literature. The question was for both of you. Maybe Juali, if you can tell us a bit, not just Ramboy literature. I'm interested in knowing literature before Ramboy and literature after Ramboy also.
Yeah. Presently, there are only few women in literatures. Okay, so like most of them are academicians. Okay, academicians, and then most of them belong to comparative literatures. Okay, Department of Comparative Literatures. Okay, earlier in Mizoram we used to have some female writers. Okay, so one I remember one is Kolkungi. Okay, she's from my locality. She used to write dramas and stories. Okay, and then she had also enough contributions in translations, but now she's no more. And then another one is Hmingthanzuali Silo. Okay, she composed many songs. Apart from many songs, she also wrote books on Lalnu Ropiliani. Ropiliani means the story of Mizo chieftainess Ropiliani. Okay, so and then both of them are no more. And then so both this Kolkungi and Hmingthanzuali are Padma Shri awardee, okay, in literature. Okay, so and then we also have Nuthungi. Nuthungi, she was from the southern part of Mizoram. Okay, so and then she composed songs for children, and I think she also wrote some stories. I'm not very sure, but and then and okay, and recently one female volunteer during the insurgency period, Rebecca. Okay, she was a female volunteer. She recently published a book on her experiences about Rambuai. Okay, so that's all about my knowledge on women's in literature.
One thing which is happening at the moment is that the global pandemic of COVID-19 is affecting the world all over the lives and communities all over the world. Can you tell us a bit about how the pandemic has affected you yourself and the people or the women that you are engaged with? Jolly.
I have not much knowledge about pandemic and women, okay, right now, because we hardly move out of our home these days again. So but I really concerned about vegetable vendors. Okay, most of them are women. Okay, even in my locality, if you come to my local market, okay, all of the vegetable vendors are women. So I'm very sure that these women are facing difficulties during this time. Okay, because they earn their livelihood by selling their vegetables. Because during the lockdown, they can't open their shops, and most of these grocery shops were also owned by women. Okay, so in this way, women may face some problems.
Mary, could you share with us about the impact that the pandemic has had on you and the people that you are engaged with, and also the Mizo people's response to the pandemic?
Yes, thank you for asking. Yeah. I would say in general, not just women. First, let me explain about, yes, of course, there is some impact on women's life. Suppose some women have to abandon our customs and our culture. See, when anyone died, the people would gather at the house, then they would hold a funeral service, gathering a lot of people. But in that case, we are not allowed to have more than 35 persons. And there are some mother who had to abandon their children due to the COVID to the hospital. They have to separate themselves from the hospital. So in that case, there are lots of sufferings regarding the women's, not only in the field of economic, in the field of, as well as the way we live our life. It's really affect our life. Yeah, in general, I would say that, let me point out the positive side of the pandemic, our response, how the Mizo people help each other. When the central government imposed a lockdown in Mizoram, the government issued guidelines and hand over the authority to the local task force. I think local task force is implemented in every area, right? Even in Manipur. Yeah, the local level task force are usually appointed by the leaders of young Mizo associations from every local area. They impose strict rules according to the guidelines and provided, and they identify family who needs help without any discrimination, whether he is a migrant or whether he is a non-Mizo. They help them by providing them rice, dal, cooking oil, etc. So They contribute the amount of the fund contributed to the local task force by the local areas was utilized to help the poor and the needy in the areas. This was the common practice in all parts of the local community, especially in Mizoram. And also what is very interesting, I would like to point out here, is that there is an unending support from the villagers by offering the vegetables, produce from their farming field to the city. So they supplied with truckload without expecting any returns. I believe every locality in Aizawl have received these beautiful gestures from our village. At the same time, people in the city would send back some kinds of stuff like aloo, dal to various parts of the village. This kind of practice was stemmed from our Mizo culture, gobaina, that is service above oneself. Even just a few days back, we have one particular area in Aizawl that has a number of COVID positive. This particular area observed a strict lockdown for since many days ago, but they received lots and lots of support from other areas, even from our local church. Just recently, 2-3 days ago, they handed over 1 lakh rupees to this particular area. Thank you.
Thank you so much for telling us about this. And you're right, Mary, even in Manipur, there is a kind of community help that is going on from the community as well as from relatives from the village. Thank you, Mary and Juali, for joining us for this Cultures of Peace program today. And it's been wonderful talking to you both about such silent voices like church women and women prisoners of the former volunteers of the MNF, which you have been bringing out through your work. And it's really heartening to see how women's agency is being brought forward and how a new history is being made, so that I would say it's a more equal history now that you're working at. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.